Electronic Sounds Audio, the YouTube channel for you.
Hey, what's happening, everyone? It's Dean from Electronic Sounds. Stick around. Today, I'm really excited to share with you a brand new effects app from one of my favorite app developers, Audiomodern. This one is called Gatelab, and it's a really powerful tool for creative gating and also for creative panning effects. Come on, let's check it out. Okay, real quick, let me show you how I put that piece together. The first track here is a play beat sampler from Audiomodern, and this is just holding down the kick drum beat and an open hi-hat for us. It's not doing any randomizing at all, but I also have an instance of play beat here that's playing back the percussion sounds, and this is randomizing every 4 bars and creating a new percussion line for us. Next up, I've got yet another instance of play beat, and this is just holding down a ride cymbal pattern. There's not any randomization happening here. Next up, we've got a Audiomodern Riffer app, which is actually creating the bass line for this groove, and the bass line is randomizing in the key of F pentatonic minor every 8 bars. So every 8 bars, Riffer there is generating a new bass line for us. The bass line is being generated by the SynthMaster 2 plugin from KV331 Audio. Next up, we've got the chord pad that was being gated with Gatelab. The chord itself was being played from the SynthMaster 1 synth. It's one of my presets. It's called 16-bit dub pad. And let's see here. There was the helium sequencer that was allowing me to hold down the note information here. It's not really relevant, but the helium sequencer holding down just a chord to play back there. It's a sustained chord so that Gatelab could have something to gate. A little bit of extra reverb coming through from the black hole reverb. And last but not least, we have the amazing noises limiter on that master bus to help protect our ears, our headphones, and our speakers. All right. This example uses pretty much my favorite way to use the Gatelab plugin. What I've done is I've loaded a chilled atmosphere sample inside of Beatmaker 3, and by default, it's just a sustained sound. Now, when I load the Gatelab plugin onto it, I'm able to create a really neat and rhythmical stereo sort of gated and muted pattern. I'm going to play for you this example, but I'm first going to play you the actual atmosphere on its own solo, and then I'm going to show you how Gatelab turns that into a rhythmical pattern that I can actually base a groove around. Check this out. Let's take a quick moment and go over the interface for Gatelab. The very first control we have on the upper left changes the state of the app between a flow state and a gated state. The gated state allows us to just easily turn any step we want on or off. The flow state allows us to get a little bit more interactive and adjust the actual volumes of each of these steps if we want to go that route and create a little bit more intricate patterns. The next control over here determines how sparse or dense the pattern is when we hit the randomization button. If we go to the left option here, it's going to create less notes and less gates every time we hit this random button at the top here. If we choose the middle setting, the normal setting, that just creates a few more gates every time we hit the random setting. And if we choose the setting on the right, it's going to fill in with even more different gates every time we hit the randomization button. I typically leave this on just the middle normal setting. Next up, we have the direction of the sequencer. We can either play it straight forward, or we can play this pattern in reverse, or we can also change to a ping pong mode, where it plays the pattern to the end and then back again. Obviously, the big pattern in the middle is our global randomization, and every time we hit that, it's going to create a brand new pattern from scratch. We can also reset by hitting the little reset button on the right of the randomization to clear the pattern out, maybe if we want to put just something in by hand from scratch. Over here, we've got the bypass control, so we can turn the app either on or off on our sounds. And lastly, we've got this infinity control over here on the right. Not lastly, but lastly in the top row. And what this does is it is a really neat and creative function. The number represents how many bars it's going to play the pattern before it randomly generates a brand new pattern. So if we have it set to 1, every time it plays the pattern through 1 time, it's going to randomly generate a brand new pattern. I like to set this to either 4, 8, or 16, so that every 8 bars or every 16 bars, the app will generate a new pattern automatically and randomly. It's sort of like jamming with an extra person in the studio, and like a lot of the other Audiomodern apps, can really take your performances and your live jams to a whole nother level. Let's move a little bit further down and talk a little bit more about some of these other controls. First up, we can change the processing chain from a mono to a stereo signal path. On the stereo signal path, we can add gates to either the left or the right channel. And if we want to link those channels together, we can highlight the little L button. And now I can add or take away gates to both channels at the same time. Next up, we have the tempo of the sequencer, how fast this is going to run. So we can go very fast, all the way up to 64th notes, to very slow, all the way down to 1 bar per each, gate. And using that very slow 1-to-1 ratio, where each, step represents a full measure, you could actually use this to, let's say, turn the volume of a track on and off every 4 or 8 bars. Very creative uses we can get out of this. Next up, we've got how many steps the actual pattern is going to be. We can go all the way up to a 64 note pattern. We'll need to adjust the loop brace here in this section if we want to utilize all of the steps. So for example, if I want to have a 64 note pattern, I need to make sure that the loop brace, is all the way from the beginning to the end. Then when I hit randomize, it knows that I want to work within the full length of that pattern. If I don't want such a, robust pattern and I want to keep it more simple, I can just use the reset feature that we explored earlier. I can even double tap on the amount of steps here and bring that back to a 16-step pattern. Now let's say that I'm putting in some steps maybe, and I'm really happy with a few of these, but it's just not quite working out 100% the way that I want, and I want to maybe randomize it some more. But maybe I want to keep these first 2 steps, to be the same, and randomize just the other steps, we can utilize the lock feature for that. And I can tap on the steps that I want to remain locked in place no matter what randomizing is happening. And now when I hit the random button, the other steps may, fill in around those lock steps, but those 4 steps that we locked will always stay locked. If I want to, remove that and go on with being able to just add my own notes, I can I can go back into the lock mode rather, and I can unlock those 4 notes. And now when I randomize, we're just back to a complete randomization. Next up, we have a density control. And one of the neat things about Gatelab is that each step actually allows us to divide it into multiple steps. If I click the little gray dot beneath the step one time, I get a half. And if I click it another time, I divide that step into 2 steps. And if I click it one more time, we divide that little step, its individual step, into triplets. So we've got a full step, a half step, 2 steps, and then a triplet step as well. And you can get really creative doing this, on any of these. Let's take a moment and focus a little bit deeper on the density and randomization controls because they work hand in hand. If I take the number here and I change it from a 0 to, any number, let's say 5, this is going to determine how many steps of the pattern that we generate randomly might have density settings. So now if I randomize, we'll see that some of these steps are actually getting those density settings, and not every step is just a standard step. We can have, more or less of those as we want. I could bring that down to like a number 3, and we're going to get less of those density steps. I can reset this to 0 by just, going back and then taking away those density controls. And also, if I randomize a pattern, that has some density in it, if I want to affect maybe just these steps that have the density in them, we can click this little randomization next to the number. And it's just going to take those steps that have the density settings, and it's going to randomize those. So let's use this in conjunction with this lock feature. And I can go in and I can lock some of these steps, maybe some of them that have density and others that don't. And then I can randomize the whole pattern again. And we're locking, some of those steps in place there, but we're also generating lots of new options as well. Now, you might be saying to yourself, what if I come across, a pattern that sounds fantastic, and I want to make sure that I can get back to that pattern at any time super easily within Gatelab? All we need to do is use their presets at the bottom, and it couldn't be easier. We just tap one, and now I've gone ahead and saved this exact pattern into preset 10. I can call up any of the presets that I previously saved by just tapping on those. Super easy. The next control we have opens up the preset menu, and they've included quite a few shapes and interesting patterns to get us started with. Next to that, we've got a really interesting control that we're not going to get super deep into today, but this is the disintegrate control and the grow control. These relate directly to the amount of bars that we have selected next to the infinity control here. The disintegrate command, if we turn this on, will start to take away randomly gates from our pattern over this number of bars. So if I have it set to 8 over an 8-bar pattern, the Gatelab is going to randomly start taking away some of these gates every time it plays through the pattern. The grow pattern is literally, if we start from scratch and we press play, every time it plays through the pattern, it's going to start adding a few more notes to the pattern until we've played through a full 8 bars, a full 8 times through the pattern, at which it will stop growing the pattern. I hope that makes sense. But again, the one on the left is for disintegrating your pattern, and the one on the right is for growing your pattern. And again, they're both related to the number of bars that we've got set right here. Let's just go over these last few controls here. The feather control turns the gating from a really hard and staccato gate to, if you bring the feather on, it breaks the edges a little bit more soft. So like if you're getting maybe a little bit of clicks or pops in your sound, you can bring the feather up and kind of smooth the edges on these gates, or you can leave it all the way down for a really staccato feel. The next control is shuffle, and this is kind of like the amount of swing and groove to the sequence here. Last up, we have the dry wet control. So we can, have the original sustained sound still coming through in the background if we want. We could have the original sustained sound like coming through just a tiny little bit, or we could have it completely gated. So when there's, gates, then there's zero volume coming through. I just want to reiterate that you can save your own presets. So if you're happy with any of these presets, you can just click a number down at the bottom and save the preset into that number preset. And then you can recall any of the presets super easily as well. Oh, one more thing, and that is this little loop brace here at the bottom allows us to, even while it's playing, change the number of steps. So I could, change from a 16-step pattern all the way down to like a 3-step pattern if I wanted to in real time as this is playing. Super handy. Just two more things about the interface before we move on. Let's say that you don't like a preset that you'd saved and you want to go ahead and clear this out. Let's say we're not happy with preset number 3. We can go ahead and click the little edit icon in the upper right here, which gives us the ability to delete any of these presets. Next up, we've also got this little gear icon on the upper right, and that allows us to assign our MIDI controller to literally anything in this app. So if you've got a robust MIDI controller with a lot of knobs and a lot of buttons, you can get really creative with your MIDI mapping to Gatelab as well. For this last example today, I've loaded another atmosphere sample inside of Beatmaker 3. This is like a sustained pad type of sound, and we're using the Gatelab plugin on that to turn it from a sustained sound to more of an arpeggiated, gated, rhythmic sequence type sound that I could write another kind of dub techno style groove around. Check this one out.